Haunted Cupboard. There was something off about the cupboard in our dining room. It was an old oak piece of furniture that had been in our family for generations. The dark wood, ornate carvings, and brass handles gave it an almost regal appearance, but it was its history that sent shivers down my spine. My grandmother used to tell us that the cupboard had belonged to a distant relative who dabbled in the occult. It sounded like a story meant to keep us in line as kids, but recent events have made me question everything. It all started when my parents decided to renovate the house. They wanted to create more space in the dining room, and the cupboard, with its age and size, was the first item on the list to go. My father and I struggled to move it, the wood creaking ominously, as if it resisted our efforts. Finally, we managed to slide it into the garage, where it stood, casting long, eerie shadows in the dim light. That night, I had a nightmare. I was in the dining room, alone, and the cupboard was back in its place. Its doors slowly creaked open, revealing darkness inside. As I approached, a cold, skeletal hand shot out, grabbing my wrist. I woke up screaming, my heart pounding. It was just a dream, I told myself, just a dream. The next morning, I found the cupboard doors open. I asked my parents if they had moved it back, but they denied it, saying they had been in bed all night. The tension in our house grew as strange occurrences became more frequent. Objects went missing, only to reappear in bizarre places. The temperature in the dining room would drop suddenly, and we all felt a presence watching us. One evening, as I was watching TV alone, I heard a faint scratching noise coming from the garage. My first thought was that it was a mouse, but the sound grew louder and more insistent. Heart pounding, I grabbed a flashlight and headed to the garage. The beam of light cut through the darkness, illuminating the cupboard. The scratching noise stopped as soon as I entered the room. I stood there, flashlight trembling in my hand, waiting for something, anything to happen. Suddenly, the cupboard doors burst open, slamming against the sides with a force that shook the walls. A gust of icy wind rushed out, nearly knocking me off my feet. I stumbled back, tripping over a toolbox and landing hard on the concrete floor. I scrambled to my feet and ran back into the house, slamming the garage door behind me. My parents, alarmed by the noise, came running. I tried to explain what had happened, but they looked at me with a mix of concern and disbelief. My father decided to check the garage himself. He returned a few minutes later, pale and shaken, confirming that the cupboard doors were indeed open, but he insisted there must be a rational explanation. Determined to get to the bottom of this, I began researching the history of the cupboard. I discovered that it had originally belonged to a woman named Elizabeth Thornton, a distant relative who lived in the early 1900s. Elizabeth was rumored to have been involved in dark rituals and had disappeared under mysterious circumstances. Her house burned down, and the cupboard was one of the few items salvaged from the wreckage. I also found an old journal belonging to my grandmother. In it, she described strange occurrences linked to the cupboard and mentioned that Elizabeth had used it to store items related to her rituals. The final entry was a warning. Do not disturb the cupboard. It is a gateway to something beyond our understanding. Despite the warnings, I was determined to end the haunting once and for all. I enlisted the help of my friend Mark, who had a keen interest in the paranormal. We set up cameras and audio recorders around the cupboard, hoping to capture evidence of the supernatural. That night, we sat in the darkened garage, waiting. Hours passed with nothing but the occasional creak of the house settling. Just as we were about to call it a night, the temperature dropped dramatically. Our breath became visible in the cold air. The cupboard doors began to rattle, then slowly creaked open. Mark and I exchanged nervous glances, but held our ground. From the darkness of the cupboard, a low, guttural growl emanated. The sound was unlike anything I had ever heard, primal and filled with malice. A shadowy figure began to emerge, its form twisting and contorting as if struggling to break free. Mark and I were frozen with fear, unable to move. Suddenly, the figure lunged at us. Mark screamed and bolted for the door, but I stood my ground, driven by a mix of terror and determination. I shouted at the entity, demanding it reveal itself. The shadow paused, its form shifting, then retreated back into the cupboard, the doors slamming shut with a deafening bang. The next morning, we reviewed the footage. The cameras had captured everything: the growl, the shadowy figure, and even my confrontation with the entity. Mark was visibly shaken and refused to discuss the incident further, but I was more determined than ever to put an end to the haunting. I returned to my grandmother's journal, searching for any clue on how to banish the entity. The final pages contained a ritual meant to seal the gateway. It required specific items: candles, salt, and a chant in a language I didn't recognize. I gathered everything I needed and waited for nightfall. As darkness fell, I set up the candles in a circle around the cupboard, sprinkling salt at the base. I began the chant, stumbling over the unfamiliar words. The air grew heavy, and a low hum filled the room. The cupboard doors began to rattle violently, but I continued the chant, my voice growing stronger with each repetition. The doors burst open, and the shadowy figure reappeared, writhing and thrashing. I stepped forward, continuing the chant, forcing the entity back. With a final, desperate cry, the shadow dissolved into the darkness, and the cupboard doors slammed shut one last time. The atmosphere in the house lightened immediately. The strange occurrences stopped, and the feeling of being watched vanished. My parents were relieved, though they never fully believed my story. The cupboard remained in the garage, untouched and undisturbed. A week later, we decided to sell the cupboard to an antique dealer. As the dealer loaded it into his truck, he remarked on its craftsmanship and asked about its history. I simply told him it was a family heirloom with too many bad memories attached. As the truck drove away, I felt a sense of closure. The haunting was over and the entity was gone. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear a faint scratching sound and wonder if the cupboard truly took its secrets with it. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more spine-chilling tales. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Sweet dreams, if you can. The Haunted Hotel Room, 222. The rain pounded against the windshield of my car, each droplet a resounding tap against the glass, echoing in the silence of the deserted road. The GPS had led me astray again, or so I thought, as I squinted at the map on my phone, trying to find my way back to the main highway. It was late, far too late to be driving in the middle of nowhere. The moon was hidden behind a shroud of storm clouds, and the only light came from the occasional flash of lightning, illuminating the dark landscape in brief, eerie bursts. After what felt like an eternity of driving through the night, I finally saw a flicker of light in the distance. As I approached, the faint outline of a building emerged from the darkness. A neon sign buzzed and flickered, the Wayfarer Inn. Relieved to have found some semblance of civilization, I pulled into the gravel parking lot. the tires crunching loudly as I came to a stop. The inn looked like something out of an old horror movie. It was a 2-story structure with peeling paint and sagging eaves, but the light in the windows offered a promise of warmth and shelter. I grabbed my suitcase and dashed through the rain to the entrance, the cold droplets soaking through my clothes. Inside, the inn was surprisingly well kept, though it had an unmistakably vintage feel. The reception desk was manned by an elderly woman with a kind smile, her white hair pulled back into a neat bun. "Good evening," she greeted me. "Looking for a room for the night?" "Yes, please," I replied, trying to shake off the chill from the rain. "Just one night." She nodded and handed me a brass key attached to a worn leather fob. "Room 222, she said, her smile faltering slightly. "Enjoy your stay." I took the key and headed up the creaky wooden staircase to the second floor. The hallway was dimly lit, the wallpaper a faded floral pattern that must have been fashionable decades ago. As I walked, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I reached room 222 and unlocked the door, stepping into the room with a sigh of relief. The room was small but cozy, with a single bed, a nightstand, and a dresser. A large window overlooked the parking lot, and I could hear the rain pattering against the glass. I set my suitcase down and flopped onto the bed, exhausted. As I lay there, my mind wandered, and I found myself thinking about the old woman at the front desk. There had been something strange about her, something unsettling in the way her smile had faded when she mentioned the room number. Shrugging off my unease, I got up to take a shower, hoping to wash away the stress of the day. The bathroom was clean but old-fashioned, with a clawfoot tub and a rusty mirror. As I stood under the hot spray, I felt the tension in my muscles begin to melt away. After my shower, I changed into my pajamas and climbed into bed. The sheets were cool and crisp, and despite the storm raging outside, I felt a sense of calm. I closed my eyes and let myself drift off to sleep. It must have been hours later when I awoke with a start. The room was pitch black, and for a moment, I couldn't remember where I was. Then, the events of the evening came rushing back. I lay still, listening to the rain and the occasional rumble of thunder. But there was something else, a soft, almost imperceptible sound, a whispering. I sat up, straining to hear. The whispers seemed to be coming from the corner of the room, near the window. My heart pounded in my chest as I reached for the bedside lamp and flicked it on. The room was empty, just as it had been when I went to bed. The whispers stopped the moment the light came on. "Just my imagination," I muttered, trying to reassure myself. I turned the light off and lay back down, but sleep was elusive. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. Hours seemed to crawl by, each minute dragging into the next. At some point, I must have dozed off again, because the next thing I knew, I was waking up to the sound of my phone buzzing. It was still dark outside, but the rain had stopped. I checked the time, 3:33 a.m. Groggy and disoriented, I answered the call without checking the caller ID. "Hello?" I croaked. "Get out of the room." The voice on the other end was distorted, as if it were being transmitted through a broken speaker. "Get out now, before it's too late." I sat up, adrenaline coursing through my veins. "Who is this?" "Leave room 222. You have to leave." The line went dead. I stared at the phone in my hand, my heart racing. Who had called me, and how did they know I was in room 222? Panic set in, and I jumped out of bed, my mind racing. I grabbed my suitcase and threw my clothes inside haphazardly. As I was about to leave, the whispers started again, louder this time, insistent. The temperature in the room plummeted, and my breath came out in visible puffs. I reached for the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. I pulled and twisted, but it was as if the door was locked from the outside. The whispers grew louder, almost deafening, and I could feel a presence closing in around me. Desperate, I ran to the window and tried to open it, but it was stuck. I pounded on the glass, hoping to break it, but it wouldn't give. The whispers were now a chorus of voices, overlapping and echoing, filling my mind with an overwhelming sense of dread. Suddenly, the room went silent. The whispers stopped, and the temperature returned to normal. I stood there panting, my hands trembling. The door to the room slowly creaked open, revealing the dark hallway beyond. I didn't wait to see what was happening. I grabbed my suitcase and bolted out of the room, not looking back. As I ran down the hallway, I heard the whispers again, fainter now, as if they were coming from a great distance. I reached the stairs and practically flew down them, bursting into the lobby, where the elderly woman was still at the desk. "What's wrong?" she asked, her eyes wide with concern. I need to leave," I stammered. "Something's wrong with that room." She sighed and shook her head. "I'm so sorry, dear. I hoped it wouldn't come to this." "What do you mean?" I demanded. "Room 2022. It's haunted," she admitted. "We've had other guests report strange occurrences, but nothing this severe. We usually close it off, but with the storm, we had no other rooms available." I stared at her in disbelief. "Haunted? By what?" She looked down, her expression sad. "There was an incident many years ago. A guest died in that room under mysterious circumstances. Since then, strange things have happened to anyone who stays there." "Why didn't you warn me?" I asked, anger and fear bubbling up inside me. "I didn't think it would be this bad," she said quietly. "I'm truly sorry. Here, let me refund your stay and find you another place to spend the night." I accepted her offer, though it did little to calm my nerves. As I left the inn and drove away, the first light of dawn began to break through the clouds. I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw the inn growing smaller in the distance. A shiver ran down my spine as I recalled the whispers and the cold presence in the room. Weeks passed, and I tried to put the experience behind me, but every night I found myself waking up at 3:33 a.m., the memory of the whispers still fresh in my mind. I did some research and found stories of other people who had stayed in room 222, each with their own terrifying tale. Some claimed to have seen apparitions, others spoke of hearing voices, but all had one thing in common. They left the room with a deep, lingering fear. I contacted a paranormal investigator, hoping to get some answers. We met at a coffee shop and I recounted my experience. He listened intently, nodding occasionally. "Room 222 is known among those of us in the field," he said. "It's a hotspot for paranormal activity. The incident the innkeeper mentioned was just the beginning. Over the years, there have been numerous reports of strange occurrences, all linked to that room." "What can I do?" I asked. "I can't keep waking up like this." He thought for a moment. "Sometimes, acknowledging the presence can help. Spirits often seek recognition or closure. If you can, go back to the inn and confront whatever is in that room. It might give you the peace you need." The thought of returning to the Wayfarer Inn filled me with dread, but I knew he was right. I couldn't live in fear forever. A few days later, I made the journey back, arriving at the inn just as the sun was setting. The elderly woman at the desk looked surprised to see me. "You're back," she said. "Are you sure you want to do this?" I nodded. "I need to." She handed me the key to room 222, her hand trembling. "Good luck," she whispered. I made my way up the stairs, the familiar creaks and groans of the old wood sending chills down my spine. I reached the door to room 222 and took a deep breath before unlocking it and stepping inside. The room looked just as it had before, but there was an oppressive atmosphere, as if the very air was charged with energy. I set my suitcase down and took a seat on the bed, waiting. Hours passed, and nothing happened. I began to wonder if I had imagined the whole thing. But then, just as the clock struck 3:33 a.m., the temperature plummeted and the whispers began anew. I stood up, my heart pounding. "Who are you?" I called out. "What do you want?" The whispers grew louder, more insistent, but I couldn't make out any words. I closed my eyes, trying to focus. "Please," I said. "If you need something, tell me." There was a sudden silence, and then a single word, clear and distinct. "Help." I opened my eyes, and there in the corner of the room stood a figure. It was a man, his form translucent and shimmering. His eyes were filled with a deep sadness. "What happened to you?" I asked, my voice trembling. He pointed to the window, and I saw it now, a faint outline of a noose hanging from the ceiling. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. This man had taken his own life in this room, and his spirit had been trapped here ever since. "I'm so sorry," I whispered. "How can I help you?" He looked at me, his eyes pleading. "Forgive." Tears streamed down my face as I nodded. "I forgive you," I said. "I forgive you for whatever happened. Please find peace." The man's form flickered, and then, with a soft sigh, he vanished. The temperature in the room returned to normal, and the oppressive feeling lifted. I knew then that he had found the closure he needed. I left the Wayfarer Inn that morning, feeling a sense of relief. The nightmare stopped, and I no longer woke up at 3:33 a.m., but I never forgot the man in room 222, or the lesson I learned about the lingering power of unresolved grief. If you ever find yourself at the Wayfarer Inn, remember this story. Room 222 may seem like just another room, but it holds the echoes of a tragic past, and if you listen closely, you might hear the whispers of a spirit seeking peace. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe for more chilling tales. Sweet dreams, and beware of the shadows. Lost Echoes. The highway stretched endlessly, a ribbon of asphalt cutting through the barren landscape like a scar. It was on this desolate stretch of road that Ethan's life changed forever. He and his younger sister, Lily, were on their way to visit their grandparents when tragedy struck. The sun was setting, casting an orange glow across the horizon, when a sudden gust of wind sent their car careening off the road. The world spun in a blur of metal and glass, and when Ethan regained consciousness, Lily was gone. Frantic and disoriented, Ethan stumbled out of the wrecked car, calling out for his sister. But the only response was the eerie silence of the deserted highway. Panic gripped his heart as he realized the gravity of the situation. He had lost Lily in the middle of nowhere. With trembling hands, Ethan reached for his phone, but there was no signal. The realization that they were truly alone in this vast emptiness sent a shiver down his spine. Determined to find Lily, Ethan set off on foot, his mind racing with fear and desperation. As night descended, the highway transformed into a sinister realm. Shadows danced along the edges of Ethan's vision. Whispers echoed through the stillness, and the distant howl of a lone wolf sent chills down his spine. Every step felt like a descent into madness as he searched tirelessly for any sign of his sister. Hours turned into days, and Ethan's hope began to wane. He stumbled upon abandoned cars, relics of past accidents, their shattered windows reflecting the moonlight like haunted eyes. But there was no trace of Lily. Just when Ethan was on the brink of giving up, he heard it, the faint sound of a child's laughter. Heart pounding, he followed the sound, his legs carrying him deeper into the darkness. The laughter led him to an old, decrepit motel, its neon sign flickering like a dying ember. Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of decay and neglect. The walls were adorned with peeling wallpaper and faded photographs, each telling a story of forgotten dreams and lost souls. But Ethan's focus was singular. He had to find Lily. The laughter grew louder, guiding him down a hallway lined with closed doors. With trembling hands, Ethan pushed open the last door, and there she was. Lily, sitting on the edge of a dusty bed, her eyes wide with innocence and fear. "Ethan," she cried, running into his arms. "I knew you'd find me." Relief flooded through Ethan as he held his sister close, his eyes brimming with tears of joy. But his happiness was short-lived as he noticed something unsettling. Lily's laughter had ceased, replaced by a haunting silence. Before he could react, the room transformed. The walls warped and twisted, shadows contorted into monstrous shapes, and a chill settled in the air that froze Ethan's blood. He tried to move, to scream, but he was paralyzed, trapped in a nightmare from which there was no escape. The horror acts unfolded before his eyes, phantoms of the past tormenting him, whispers of lost souls beckoning him into the abyss. Lily's form shifted, her innocent face contorting into a grotesque mask of terror, her voice a haunting echo in his mind. "Why couldn't you save me, Ethan? Why did you let me go?" Tears streamed down Ethan's face as he realized the truth. The motel was a prison, a purgatory for lost souls, and he was trapped in its grip. The sadness of his failure, the agony of his paralysis, and the horror of his surroundings merged into a cacophony of despair. But in that darkness, a glimmer of clarity emerged. Ethan understood that his love for Lily, his unwavering determination to find her, was his salvation. With every ounce of strength left in him, he fought against the paralysis, reaching out to his sister. And in that moment of connection, the darkness shattered, the horror dissipated, and Ethan found himself lying on the deserted highway, the first rays of dawn breaking through the clouds. Lily was beside him, her hand in his, a smile of understanding on her face. "We made it," she whispered, her voice filled with love and forgiveness. But as Ethan tried to sit up, he realized the cruel twist of fate. He was paralyzed from the neck down. The horror had taken its toll, leaving him trapped in a body that no longer obeyed his commands. As tears welled up in his eyes, Ethan looked at Lily, his heart heavy with sorrow and gratitude. She was safe. They were together, but their journey had come at a cost too great to bear. The highway stretched before them, a symbol of endless possibilities and unspoken fears. And in that bittersweet moment, Ethan and Lily understood that sometimes the greatest horrors are not the ones we face in the darkness, but the ones that linger in the echoes of our own hearts. As Ethan and Lily's harrowing ordeal came to an end, the echoes of their journey lingered in the haunted highways of their minds. The horrors they faced, the love that bound them, and the sacrifices they made were etched into their souls forever. Join us next time for more spine-chilling tales and heart-wrenching encounters. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to dive deeper into the realms of fear and courage. Until then, beware of the darkness that lurks within and without, for in the world of horror, every ending is a new beginning. Thank you for watching, and may your nightmares be filled with echoes of hope and resilience. Good night, if you dare to close your eyes.